developments around the markets, global, African, even Nigerian markets, and see the implications and impact on Nigeria this period of the COVID-19 pandemic. With me to have this conversation is Mr. Bosun Mofaye, financial analyst, financial journalist, and CEO of Frontier Africa Reports. Nice to have you, Mr. Bosun.
Good morning, and I think we'll welcome ourselves to another week.
In the lockdown period.
In the lockdown period.
COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And happy Easter Monday to you, sir.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
So how's the experience been? I mean, how was the weekend?
Well, the weekend was the biggest news over the weekend, apart from the cases around the pandemic. Of course, one of the biggest stories from the political side was the recovery of the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who went out of intensive care.
That was a very big positive news.
It was a very big positive news.
One.
And the big story that I took out of the Boris Johnson living intensive care unit was his a video address in which he expressed very great gratitude and debt that he says he owes to the NHS, the health services in the UK. And I think he spoke convincingly and from the heart. And I think if there's anything our politicians, our ruling class of Nigeria should learn from how to speak to the people in manners in which it will bring trust and respect and show that you truly care, was the way UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson spoke over the weekend. That went a very long way. It's a morale booster, it's an energy booster, not just for the members of the NHS and for every healthcare services and those others who are in the front line of the battle of this against this pandemic, including the security agencies who are also exposing themselves, stopping people on the way, asking them where you're going, where you're coming from, do you have relevant papers to allow you to move around and things like that. We should also remember the security agents at this time. The NHS, so the medical personnel are at the front line, but the security agencies and all of them who are also on the streets day and night should also be praised. So that's one big story. But on the business side was the end of the price war or the oil war between Saudi Arabia and Russia and Mexico joined at the last minute.
Yeah.
So we now have a clarity as to where we're going for this year and a little bit of clarity into 2021 in terms of the cutback of about 9.7 million barrels. What will Nigeria be producing and our own cutback from the 1st of May till the end of the year. What all of that will do to the price of oil is anyone's guess. Our budget rebalancing for 2020 is now $30 a barrel. We're about $31, $32 a barrel. That's still not too comfortable for us to have enough to fund the budget and perhaps to have some extra dollars in excess crude account and what have you. So those are the two biggest stories over the weekend. On the COVID side, the number of cases are still rising. The U.S. is facing a very tough situation as we speak.
Being the epicenter now.
Yes, now the epicenter. In Africa, we've seen a few cases, more cases in a few places. We're doing some testing. Some countries are doing better than others. But I think, technically speaking, I'm not sure anyone and any country in the world was really prepared or fully prepared for the pandemic. So we should give that to ourselves. Yeah. No country in the world was fully prepared. Despite all the conspiracy theory and whatever, no one was fully prepared. So we shouldn't, I think we should take Nigeria as, I'm speaking specifically now to this country, Nigeria, and the rest of Africa, where folks are complaining about inadequate ventilators, inadequate test kits and what have you, that we were never prepared for this. No one is really prepared for a pandemic. You never can tell where it's going to come out from. Pandemic or virus is part of us, as part of the what is on the planet Earth. Yeah. Some cases are just about Ebola have just been recovered in Congo DRC, and after about a few weeks of everyone thinking that the virus had gone, and suddenly there were 1 or 2 cases just emerging. So it has to be a work in progress, but it has to prepare us for most likely the next pandemic or the next virus that might come. in whatever form that may come. It may take weeks, it may take months, it may take years or decades down the line before something like this come up again. So you just have to get everybody more prepared. The US will be more prepared. Less developed countries like Nigeria will definitely get more prepared.
Yeah, and we're seeing already the warnings of a liquidity challenge. I mean, JP Morgan talking about $5 trillion going down the drain from the risk of COVID-19 pandemic. How will this affect markets? We know the markets today are on a holiday because of the Easter Monday and all that. How is it going to affect investments and activities in the market?
I think what the, and it's good to put this in perspective, again, you have a full week World Bank, IMF annual meetings, which is the virtual meetings going on now. We used to attend. It's going to be an empty building. It's going to be an empty building. But we're tracking the meetings.
Yes, we track them.
What we're doing right now is to have a special section on Frontier Africa reports to track the World Bank, IMF meetings, the virtual meetings. So we're trying to update everyone, update ourselves, even as business journalists. It's going to be an entirely different meeting for the World Bank and the IMF team. The various reports for Africa, for the Global Economic Update to be out. It's going to be totally different. The big story for everyone will be health, safety, security, and climate change, and what have you moving forward. I think those will be the main dominating headlines or issues for the meeting, for the meetings, but for the spring meetings. But again, straight to your question, the World Bank and the IMF and other international agencies are already thinking of how to mitigate the impact of what you talk about at the JP Morgan, looking at $5 trillion wipeout, so that there will be less pressure on emerging market assets moving forward. That is on one side. This on part of the package, which is the global stimulus package right now, because the central bankers have talked to themselves, the fiscal authorities are speaking to each other. You see the various teams being raised even by the African Union, including Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Donna Kaberuka, and the rest of them, Tijantiem, or former Credit Suisse, to help negotiate deals for Africa in terms of reducing debt for poorest countries. I think it's in everybody's interest. What we face right now is what we call the mutually assured destruction, MAD. So you can't say, I just want to protect the United States, or I want to protect the developed markets and let the emerging and frontier markets sort themselves out. It's not going to happen. The fire is going everywhere, from house to house, from door to door. So you need to help your neighbors. It's in your best interest to do so from a financial liquidity point of view. So let's hope that this global force of helping emerging markets and frontier markets to survive and to take less beating, as it were, again, because the developed market investors are holding huge chunk of the both sovereign, subnational, and corporate debts issued by Mozambique, by Nigeria, by Ghana, by South Africa, and companies on the continent. And if you go to other countries, it's the same. So it's a global financial marketplace, and everyone is involved, whether you're small markets or you're big markets. This is one of the markets in Africa, and in Nigeria specifically, where foreign investors had creamed off decent returns or decent yields on government securities in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years or so. So it's in their best interest to make sure that Nigeria, yes, we can get knocked up, but we don't get down on our knees or all fours, that Nigeria can get up. So it's in their interest to keep our markets okay, at least give us some measure of a helping hand, as it were, because, again, they are exposed to a very good measure in our market across the various asset classes. The fundamentals of our economy, as it were, are still very strong. So let's get everybody get that straight. The key problem we have is that we're dependent on funding our budgets and our expenditure largely via crude oil sales and massive foreign borrowings. And these two are now being fully exposed to the vagaries of this COVID pandemic and the attendant consequences. So how we rebalance this and move on to a more sustainable option of funding the economy and running the economy is something that is left to the fiscal authorities and the collaboration they're getting from the private sector And I'm encouraged by a few things I have heard and I've seen in a few conversations on WhatsApp group and what have you, how the government is working with the Lagos Chamber of Commerce, working with the NESG, that's the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, working with NASIMA, the Employers Consultative Association, NECA, and the rest of them, to ensure that they get the best of ideas, get the feel of the private sector, organized private sector, so that they can develop a response document and a response action, policy actions that will move us forward.
That's very key, because from the approach Nigerian 1 Minute News, we're seeing that World Bank is saying that how Nigeria manages this COVID pandemic will determine the level of recession. So we're looking at fiscal, monetary. Some economists are saying we may not have much options or space. How do you react to it?
What is being said is just like, as I heard this many years ago, look, the fact that your pocket or your purse was picked or stolen is bad news. How you move on from there to think about it on a daily basis, which one hurts you more? So how you respond to the theft of your purse, your wallet, it will determine the extent of the pain that you carry moving forward.
Because so much will be in your mind.
Because so much on your mind. Yeah. So if you keep remembering it and try to put it behind you and move, I use it as a learning curve. Perhaps you've been a little bit careless with the wallet. Perhaps you put it in the back pocket and it's bulging, and some folks took advantage of that, or you just place it somewhere on the table in a restaurant, whatever, and you're a little bit careless with it, and someone just took an opportunity, because an opportunity makes a thief. That's the destination. The definition, really. So how we move on from point A to point B, C and D with the pandemic becomes a big issue. And I think everyone is singing the same song. I think we're on the same page of the hymn book. In other words, if we need to use this as an opportunity to write a textbook or a template of a new Nigerian economy moving forward, devoid of political grandstanding, the usual civil service, make feel good method and approach and style that we've used hitherto. And I think Nigeria's political class, both the ruling party and the those in opposition parties, should put heads together at this time. We're all hurting as a country and as a world as a whole. So this is the time for everyone to bring the best of ideas to the table, and everyone should be humble to take ideas from their neighbors. So if the ruling party, the APC, believes that there are sound ideas coming from XY political party, ABC, whatever, they should take them on board and use them as a basis of moving forward. And I think that is very critical from my point of view.
Now, when you look at the markets, financial markets, capital market ecosystem is very key in this period. What would be your concerns, particularly for African and even the Nigerian markets in the midst of this whole pandemic concern?
The governments or the authorities in fiscal, also the fiscal authorities in emerging frontier markets, and I'll speak to frontier markets mainly, will have to do more domestic and foreign borrowings. Before the pandemic, there had been serious cries from a number of African countries, and mainly the big boys, Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and a few others, with the exception of, I think, Ethiopia also. About the level of debt, concerns about the sustainability of these sovereigns, and if they can take on more debt, and why should they take on more debt. We've had this front and back. It's relative to GDP or relative to revenue. What should be the basis for saying we're over borrowing or we're not borrowing? I think that conversation has now fallen flat on its face. It's down on its face to the extent that you have to recalibrate. So the news this morning, the coffee growers and coffee exporters in Kenya are hurting right now because coffee shops in Europe are shutting down. because of social distancing.
Yeah.
So, and the pandemic. So it's going all the way from the demand market to the supply market here in Africa. So Kenya and a few countries in East Africa will likely hurt on the tea export and coffee market. If you include Rwanda, Uganda, and Tanzania, those are major coffee and tea growers on the continent. So that's on one side. I haven't seen much of the cocoa for Nigeria, Cameroon, Ghana, and Ivory Coast, the big four to the west coast. That would also have its own implications if when restaurants and others close shops in Europe where they make supply chain in Switzerland. Of course, a bit of that is coming from Switzerland already because this Easter holiday, folks were buying less of chocolates than they were buying face masks and hand washing detergents and whatever. So we're seeing that across commodities. So our financial markets on the equity side, we also see companies that are listed. For example, the tea companies that are listed on the Nairobi Securities Exchange or listed on other exchanges in across East Africa, and a few of them that have businesses with the commodity exchange, whether the one in Rwanda or the one in Ethiopia, would also have taken some beating, as it were. Prices will fall, earnings will be impacted. So there's no really much of a winners or losers here. We'll have a few, but again, overall, majority of African economies are commodities dependent, whether soft commodities or crude oil or metals, or natural resources. That's what we're all about. Those who are not along that corridor are those who have tourism. Ethiopia, Kenya, Mombasa, Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, all the way down to Seychelles Islands and in Mauritius and Madagascar and all of that. So all these, or Cape Verde, all these are largely deserted. As I'm speaking now, everybody's flee. So it will hit the tourism industry, it will hit the commodities exporting countries. But how we sit down across the various markets, which include the various exchanges, the various securities and exchange commissions, and all other market professionals, put heads together and hope and plan, in a manner of speaking, to say, look, we want to keep both local and foreign investors happy. Coming back home is tight right now to find folks who have seen the extension of the lockdown or stay at home for everyone's safety, health reasons, see that they can make additional investments. But I will advise folks not to pull out their investments. Yeah, I don't advise everyone to. We'll try and see what we can manage, but this is not the time to start a massive sell down, as it were. That will not be in everyone's interest. So I advise folks to hold on to their portfolio. They can rebalance, as it were, and look at their needs. So this is a time to make informed decisions. This is a time to talk to the professionals in the market and don't start selling on a panic mode basis. Just because you want to liquidate the portfolio, get some cash, and you need your life insurance, you need your pension moving forward. Because once this pandemic is over, school fees will have to be paid. If you're owing on mortgages on rent, you will have to pay. The insurance on your vehicle is due. You haven't been able to renew because of this, you will have to renew. So these expenditures that had little or nothing to do with the pandemic. So this is not the time to say, let me sell out and forget the market. No, the market will always be there. Because the fundamentals of human activity remains very strong once this is over. Everyone will get back on the street, get back on our feet, try to move on aggressively, see what we can do in terms of productivity, and get much of our life that's been impacted by coronavirus back on track. On the economy side, I mean. But those who've lost their loved ones and family members and others and medical personnel, hearts and minds go out to those ones.
Yes. And market regulations is very key in this period to create the enabler for the ecosystem. We saw published on ProShare the framework from the International Organization of Securities Commission, that's IOSCO, saying that, well, during this period, markets will still operate, but those guidelines that will enable then become more effective and support the activities in the economy at this period. How do you see market regulations in this period as we continue to evaluate the impact of the pandemic?
The first thing that market regulators want to do at this point in time is to prevent, since most of the market participants are trading off the grid, as it were, in terms of remote trading.
Not the normal trading.
Then you have to be sure that no one is taking advantage of the market, of the ability that your market professionals, and you think the regulators are not at home, they're asleep, or they're far too far away. So they're trying to make sure that does not happen. In particular for very sensitive markets such as derivatives, the authorities would want to be sure that if there's an OTC market, which is an over-the-counter, they want to be sure that the regulations are tight, and those who are doing everything are not trying to game the market or game the system. For companies that are holding annual shareholders meetings, extraordinary general meetings, virtual meetings, and what have you, the regulators are up in front and say, look, we need to be sure that you do these virtual meetings, whatever, in line with rules and regulations that are stated. Yes, you can use technology, digital form to hold those meetings, but you must comply
with the provisions
of Companies and Allied Matters Act, of your MEMAT as a company, as a public company, and also as a listed company or market professionals. Reporting by market professionals are also there. They ensure that, yes, you need to keep the normal checks and balances in place. I think the regulators will have a little bit less hours of sleep at this point in time than hitherto, because they don't have the officers and men on the field to do routine checks. So they have to be via phone calls or using emails to check on market professionals and listed companies and issuers and others to be sure that things are done very properly and no one is trying to game investors at this particular point in time. So regulators at this time have extra work to do. But I think on that IOSCO or FCA's, Financial Conduct Authorities, or FSB as they may be called in other jurisdictions, is the same. No one will let down the guards at this point in time. So it means ramping up on technology, make sure you have surveillance that are tech-based, top-notch, to be sure that you can see what everyone else is doing online.
And now this issue of liquidity, we've heard this talk about equity. We should go for equity with borrowings, debt, but equity is an option we should take on. So economists are in that line of thought. It's not just about debt, but let's take on equity to address what has been looked at as external liquidity challenge in Nigeria. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not too sure if that question is on the sovereign side for the country.
Sovereign.
Well, yes, we can look at certain and what we call state-owned enterprises, what we call the SOEs, and see if we can inject equity into it and say we want either foreign or local investors to be on the board with the government. Sound and very great idea. Whether the private sector investors will do it remains to be seen. You know, we have JV, joint venture within in gas and in upstream. And if the experiences around those businesses are anything to go by, then where are we going to get those who want to take equity? Would that be in the power sector? Would that be in rail, for example? Are they willing to come here? How we do business? You see, I spoke with had a very lengthy, about an hour conversation on Saturday with one top government official in the investment circuit, and worried about the level of investment into Nigeria, coming to Nigeria after this pandemic. And we spoke at length. And the feeling I'm getting, like everybody's going to be on the market shopping for investment. Okay, we've had enough conversation about debt, and I agree with a few other economists. But on the equity side is the debt is is like I just hand it over to you. Equity is more like we're bedfellows, because equity is more of there's no social distancing as far as equity is concerned. Debt is more like social distancing. Okay, I lend this money, this is the rate, I go away, my money is there, my principal is there, my yield is there when it's due. That's fine. I take it and off I go. That's debt. In terms of equity, we need to look at the books together. I need to have an idea of what you're doing, how you sleep, when you wake up, and things like that. So equity means that we are all on the same table. Now, one of the first principles of equity in law is that he that comes to equity must come with clean hands. So this takes us back to one of the sing-song for the Nigerian space: sovereign, integrity of contracts, the ability for folks to exit at the time they want without anyone breathing down their neck, ability to enter into the country and do business and do legitimate business and bring legitimate machinery in without the customs and the quarantine and all the agencies in the ports when they have not committed any crimes breathing down their neck. So if they bring in machinery that need to leave the seaport and do a 2-hour journey to destination, it doesn't take 2 days or 2 weeks. Now, these are very critical issues. It looks very minute, but they all come into the sense of why investors want to go to Ghana or Rwanda or Ethiopia rather than Nigeria. The size of the population, the demography, and the advantage that it should fetch us is not fetching us. So folks who are in the investment community within the government space are seriously worried, because at state levels and at federal levels, the various government agencies that ought to help track the pandemic.
So we're pre-existing.
So before this pandemic, our FDI was going to ground zero, from billions and billions of dollars to a few hundreds of billions of dollars. We have more investment promises through the NIPC rather than the actual money coming into the country. And investors are trying to say, you need to be careful when you do business with Nigeria and Nigerians. You need to keep one eye open. Investors want to do business with you, knowing that the law and the rules of the game are there.
Of contracts.
Thank you. The rules of engagement, and they go sleep and let their money work for them. So if they are doing business with Nigeria, they keep 2 eyes open and they hire extra eyes to watch. So those inconveniences and those nuances will not make us attractive for attractive investment destination moving forward. So we need to change our behavior. This is the time for the government, I mean from the office of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the Vice President, to continue to hold this engagement with the various MDAs that will have interactions with foreign investors. And again, with the Governors Forum and the whatever, so that they know that please don't frustrate foreign investors through your attitudes, through your acts of omission or commission. That's what I'm hearing on the ground during this pandemic period. Because everyone who is everyone is beginning to, well, okay, fine, as soon as the COVID is over, everybody's going to go out. Those who are at the corporate and the sovereign level. How attractive will you be when the pandemic is over to attract investment? Because everybody will be shopping for money. Everybody will be looking for partnerships. Everybody's going to be knocking on, everybody's going to be knocking on his neighbor and say, look, I have this, you have that, can we collaborate together, can we work together? So what is my my solution is that this is the time for Nigeria to harness, and this is now, I'm taking this to the next level, to harvest the relationship and harness the relationship the handshake is currently having with the big boys, the billionaires, the millionaires who are donating to the pandemic coalition and other groups, to use them as the basis to deliver a game-changing economic redirection. And this is what I'm trying to say. Some of the folks who have put the billionaire on the table, I'm sure I can safely say they have a few more billions in home and abroad. So let me just put it simply there. So if we can work with these individuals and get them to form clusters of investment groups, rather than just donating 1 billion naira, A few of them have piles of billions. So if we can form them into various groups, clusters of 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, very small, and we identify sectors that we need investment. See, this is not just about FDI anymore. This is about DDI, which is the direct domestic investment, in which we use what we have to get what we want. Because we have dozens and dozens of Nigerians that have these deep pockets. And maybe we could just keep the, I don't know, I'm just playing the devil's advocate, keep the EFCC chairman at the lobby with some nice cup of tea and whatever. And the president and the VP or whatever and his team have a meeting with the big boys inside and say, look, if you guys bring this money in, we're not going to ask questions. Like the banking consolidation period with Chukwuma Soludo at the central bank. Look, every sin committed during this consolidation will be forgiven. Any sins committed moving forward will not be forgiven. But this time around, we'll keep the rules. We'll forgive all your sins that have been issued. Henceforth, if you do anything, we're going to. So this time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Boston, Otto, a few other guys, can you guys put 5, 6, 10 billion naira together? Apart from this coalition, do you guys want to intervene in the agro-industrialization sector and pick some sector subset of the SMEs or MSMEs to fund and also that we can, one, create jobs, create domestic raise productivity, get use local raw materials to get what we want. Because it's going to be very tough. Again, we must use this to plug into the EFCFTA. Yeah. Because the EFCFTA is about what you produce locally.
It's about 3 months to July.
Thank you.
And there's something raised by an economist saying that we are talking about trade. We're not even looking at issues around infrastructure, which would
facilitate trade.
Yes. And this has to do with liquidity, because to raise those funds for infrastructure requires liquidity.
I agree with you. You see, that is what I'm saying. That, look, I'm trying to find a way to put this very nicely here. The coalition or against COVID has some of the biggest names in Nigeria. We know these folks. They know themselves and the government knows them. See, these are my thoughts over the weekend. Let's get them to form small clusters.
Investment cluster groups.
Investment cluster groups. Investment and business cluster groups.
There have been interventions already on CBN in some areas. Like
you see, allow them to put their money where their mouth is. See, don't set up any equalization trust fund, whatever. No. 4, 5 of them, put extra 2 billion naira together. That makes 10 billion. Whatever incentives you're going to give them, offer them. We want you guys to intervene in the healthcare sector for small and medium pharmaceuticals. That's your take. Whether this pharmaceutical industry or factory is based in Kano, Kaduna, Jigawa, Zamfara, whatever it is, regardless, as long as you see that it's viable. So you guys take the 10 billion amongst yourself. It's your money. Government is not putting a dime into it. So you guys form it as a cluster, as a business and investment, intervene in these 10, 20, 30, 40 small pharmaceutical companies. Help them get back into business and what have you. Then form another cluster group for agro-allied industry, food, processing, packaging. Another one goes into whatever sector, trade, services, logistics, and all of that. So that at the end of the day, during this period, we would have created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 10 subsectors in which we bunch these very nice and generous multi-billionaires in Nigeria together, and they are holding these enterprises, which they own, is their money. Government is just giving them incentives, whether in terms of tax, whatever, I don't know, and just allow them to run the show themselves. It would have helped the government bring the necessary money in, which is the liquidity you're talking about. You would have raised the life of these MSMEs, some of them which the stock exchange will be able to pick and list or help to raise debts or raise equity moving forward. So you're building new sectors and we're creating more jobs. So that reduces the size of the external borrowings that we may be thinking of. But if we fail to utilize the power of generosity that Femi Otedola, Aliko Dangote, Agbaje, the rest of them, Rabiu, the Boa Group chairman, and the rest of them are doing. I think we should press them a little bit further. Again, most of them, 99% of them are businessmen, so they know the sectors to play in, right? So it's their money. But create them into interest groups, as it were, and let them run with ideas. You just coordinate it, as it were, but let them run these things themselves.
Interesting ideas from you, Mr. Bosa.
I just think because, again, 1 billion naira for some of them is like a drop in the ocean. So why not tell them to bring another 1 or 2 billion naira, or 2, 3, 4, 5 of you? You know, like you go to big conferences, you break out into small small groups, into various meeting rooms, and you say, look, can you take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sectors? We want to create XY job by the year 2021 or so. Let's use this COVID period. Also, your group will come up with 100,000 jobs. Both in your group will come up with 50,000 jobs, jobs, so that as soon as the COVID is over, we're intervening directly into small businesses, into MSMEs, into agriculture, into rural areas, into areas where we can get raw materials, where we need the people. So we use this time to drop the business plans, as it were. If you need registration with the CAC or with whatever, you quickly get them done, so that we're hitting the ground running as soon as the lockdown is over. Rather than just having a nice group of billionaires who we are very happy have donated to help sort out the pandemic. And at the end of the day, every of them take their bags and they're out of here, or they just sit down at home and say, well, we did our best to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bosa.
I think that's my thought this morning.
We'll still continue this conversation in the course of the week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
See you Frontier Africa Reports.
Thank you.
And that will be all for our market review for today. You can join this conversation tomorrow by 10 a.m. But first, it will begin with the 9 a.m. Nigeria Economic Discourse, Economics conversation. To come your way again,